feeling stuck lately? Like life's passing you by? Get to know M.A.Y.A.
Acronym My Ambition, Your Ambition.
Reconnect with your dreams, your goals, your ambitions. Find your motivation and start to live the life you desire. Explore the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast at M.A.Y.A.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to episode 40 of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully by now, you know that I look at my podcast as a way to look at mental wellness topics from a fresh and forward-thinking perspective. I try to make it interesting and a little bit comfortable and sometimes uncomfortable if necessary. But it's important if we're ever going to get to that best version of ourselves, that everyday version, that everyday happiness that we seek. We're going to have to be willing to pull back that veil of self-doubt and self-sabotage that plagues all of us at some point in our lives to help to identify the ambitions and harness the motivation you need to yield the satisfaction and success you want to get to in daily living, which is being that best version of you daily, happiness. So with that being said, if you're a first-time listener, well, welcome. Thank you for joining the show. I like to always say, buckle up for safety. You know, when I say that, it's not because this isn't a safe space, but occasionally, maybe I'll say something that may make you think of something. It could be a little uneasy or uncomfortable, so it could become a bumpy ride. So just buckle up until you get comfortable, obviously, with how we do things here at M.A.Y.A. And if you're a returning listener or viewer, I'm always happy to have you here. So welcome back. You do know we have a rule of thumb here at M.A.Y.A. You move at the pace that works for you. We are 40 episodes in, and every episode unintentionally has built upon the other. So if you're still hanging back in 30 because that's where there was some work you needed to do, I'm okay with that. I still appreciate if you tune in every single week to kind of stay with the flow of the show, but you work at your own pace through those episodes that you really feel like this is something you can get something from, or maybe you're gaining some insight to help someone else that you may know that could be struggling with some of these things that we say, because mental wellness is not about mental illness necessarily. People, it's about semantics and language with a lot of people. We all have mental wellness issues here and there. Mental illness is something a bit different, where maybe there's some long-standing or some reoccurring issues that are really affecting you on a long-term basis. Mental wellness is something that can fluctuate from day to day. So I'm not just about mental illness here, it's about mental wellness and helping you to find ways to truly, truly harness that. So with that being said, we're at episode 40. Attitude is everything. And I said we were talking about this last week because that episode 39 was about ego defense mechanisms. And this just kind of rolls right with that. Unintentionally. It just kind of happened. I said, next week we're going to talk about attitudes, because I think it's something really important to put it into perspective, because often we think we get it until we kind of pull back that veil, kind of really like shut down our f-stop for all our photographers out there, and we get a clearer view of perhaps what we're dealing with, and it has a lot to do with episodes. But before we jump into episode 40, we got to do our housekeeping things. So hopefully you were listening to episodes of M.A.Y.A. when you're like doing your back work at M.A.Y.A.com. If you're not, that's okay. I understand. Remember, with every episode, there is a podcast companion, which means some additional information I'm sharing on my website for you to listen to. You can always go to M.A.Y.A.com, click on the podcast resource section, and just go to the episode 40, and voila, there's some extra things I've added to kind of expand the conversation beyond the podcast. Now, hopefully by now as well, you have subscribed to my YouTube channel, M.A.Y.A. Just go to YouTube, put in M.A.Y.A. Voila, a whole bunch of Japanese anime is going to pop up. Just scroll down and boom, there's me. Click subscribe. I appreciate that. If you happen to have a podcast platform of choice, I don't hold it against you. As long as you're listening to the show and sharing the show, so be it. But you can always find episodes of M.A.Y.A. on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify. I'm also now on Amazon Audibles. All you have to do is put in M.A.Y.A., My Ambition, Your Ambition. A lot of things may pop up when you say M.A.Y.A., so you got to kind of put it as I have the show, M.A.Y.A., M.Y.A., My Ambition, Your Ambition, and my podcast will pop up. Do me a favor, if you're listening and you haven't subscribed by now, please do subscribe, and also make sure you share the show. I'm going to assume by now you have gotten social with me. So you're following me on Instagram and Twitter at Maya_Kai, Facebook, M.A.Y.A. Kai Presents. That's all the way that you can check into the show. So we've done our housekeeping things. What do we always do before we jump into the episode? I like to say that I don't really feel like this is a toolbox moment, but I like to keep it top of mind because I want it to become such a habit that you're doing it even before we start the show. You opened up your toolbox that we're working on. The whole point of Maya is to put into your everyday toolbox things that you can use to help you to get to the best version of yourself. You get into a complicated or difficult situation, and you can say, let me open up my toolbox. What should I be taking out right now? Immediately, you should be taking out emotional intelligence, that ability to help you to perceive, control, and evaluate your emotions and those of others as well, so that we learn how to respond to situations, people, opposed to react. That is the whole point of emotional intelligence, is to help you to make the best choice or the right decision from the beginning of a situation, opposed to having to go up and do cleanup work because you just allowed yourself to be in your feelings and you didn't think about what you were saying or doing. So now you got to go back and fix it. If you work from a position that you're using your emotional intelligence, guess what? You rarely have to go back and do so much cleanup work. Now, if you want to get interactive with the show, I always appreciate everyone who tunes in. Roburn, who's there in Hawaii, hello, aloha, ma. He posted his comment, whether he's listening via YouTube or if he's watching on Facebook. You put your comment into the comment section, and I can share it with everybody who's viewing the show. So it is interactive, and you can share something. If you're like, something, I agree, I disagree. I can totally remember a time where something like that happened. Share it, because one of the things that's interesting about mental wellness, especially when you get involved in mental wellness groups, or you could have been like in a job club. You ever notice that whenever you're working with people and you find that there's a similar experience that you both have had or you've had with someone in the room, it's a sense of validation. Now, we all like to tell ourselves, I don't need people to validate me. No one gives me purpose. But let's be honest, we do tend to bounce off how we feel off of other people. We kind of pick up their vibe. So sometimes it's a little reassuring, and it's not a bad thing to know that you're not walking alone in something, that somebody else has had a similar experience. Now, rule of thumb with connecting with someone with a similar experiences does not denote that you are going to be great friends or that you legitimately have something in common. People often make that mistake and align themselves with people because they feel they have a similar experience and they're connected, only to find out it may have only been that one experience that they share something in common, but the rest of their emotional and mental ecosystem is entirely different. And they have less in common than they thought. But that one moment has value. So don't overthink that one moment. Being in the here and now is so important. So if you have something and it resonates with you, share it in the comments so I can share it with the viewers, SAS listeners on the show. All right. So with that being said, let's jump into Maya, episode 40, Attitudes Everything. And before we go there, I have to share, because this is important, because this aligns with what I do every day. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, which means throughout the month, even though obviously what I do on a podcast basis is talk about mental wellness. But I think during this particular month, I'm going to share more information and probably in PSAs and things like that to give you outside views about mental health besides just me talking to you. So do be aware throughout the month of May, I'll share some additional mental health things, but May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Wanted to share that with everybody so that you know that. So you may see more things pop up in your timeline on Facebook or other social media because a lot of places, especially with those types of months dedicated to those subject areas, they like to create awareness. So do I, because that's my respective field of study for the last 20 years. Okay, so let's get into episode 40. Attitude is everything. And you know this to be true because how many times have you seen someone and said, she really has a bad attitude, or that person needs attitude adjustment? Because right now that's just so wrong. We see attitude, even though it's something that we call a mental construct. It's not something you can pick up or touch or actually pick it up and put it to the side, but you see it and you feel it and you experience it. That's how powerful attitude really is. And this is why I felt having this particular episode was really important. So why is attitude everything? Well, of course, I couldn't do this without doing my literal thing, which is, well, let's just put into a framework of exactly how we would define the word attitude. If you go Google this online, if you go to Webster's online, you're going to get a similar definition everywhere you go, where attitudes is a way that we settle our thinking or feeling about someone or something, typically one that is reflected in your behavior. So it's how you think and you feel, and it manifests in the way that you act. So with that being said, there should be no doubt about why I would say, why is attitude everything? Because it's how people perceive, how you are projecting the way you feel. Now, mind you, this can be positive or negative. So if it can be positive or negative, let's go ahead and put that into a framework as well. So I think positive attitude, the idea of it is pretty straightforward. It's pretty much when we would say you're optimistic about situations, interactions, and yourself. You tend to approach things with an upbeat, kind of outgoing, you're looking at things from the glass is half full opposed to the glass is half empty type attitude. On the flip side, if we talk about negative, well, obviously it's the exact opposite. It's saying attitude that's often uncooperative behavior, it's resentful, it's antagonistic, it's the glass is half empty type perspective of the world. So I think that saying alone is a great way to personify the idea of attitude. It's how you see things based on thinking and feeling, and then that controls your behavior. And let's be honest, if you're walking around with an attitude like the glass is half full, then that tends to reflect in what you do. I forgot to say in my intro, it's 5 o'clock someplace. So join, get your beverage of choice. This is you and me time. I'm never consistent when I open my show, but that's because I'm just trying to be honest and true in what I do. So I try not to be too scripted. So I forgot to say, this is you and me time. The next 60 minutes, it's all about you and me. So, find that spot where you can sit down and listen, grab a pencil and paper so you can jot down something. If I say something brilliant, I probably won't. And of course, grab your beverage of choice. I'm doing coffee in my favorite cup, cat lover. But it's 5 o'clock somewhere, so you can have a beer, glass of wine. I like to say welcome to my listeners. I have new listeners in Japan, Switzerland, Morocco. I so appreciate the support, and interesting how people share their experience from a different perspective culturally. So that helps me to grow my show as well. So I'm always excited to get people from around the country that listen, but also from around the globe. Makes me feel just a tad bit special. But anyways, so welcome to all the new listeners coming on in from different countries as well. So if you walk around with a glass half empty attitude, guess what? People can tell. You seem moody. You just seem like kind of like a killjoy. That's attitude. And I said attitude is a construct. It's not something you can physically touch or mold. It just exudes itself. And it's really about energy. And some people just have super bad attitudes and other people don't. We know that person. You're like, wow, that person just in the midst of all this, after everything that has happened, that person is so positive. I keep talking about this, and I'm going to create once a month where I have a special guest on the show to talk about their journey and their mental wellness. And one of the first people I want to have on is Juliet Copeland, whose journey to me is so unique. She listens to the show. She shares the show. I've never met her personally, but all I know that she inspires me on a daily basis. And I'm like, whenever I think I want to have a bad attitude about something, I always say, what am I having a bad attitude about? There are so many other people who would kill to be in where I'm at right now, who would appreciate the opportunities to not have the adversity that they're going through. Even though I don't want people to minimize themselves, but if you have to give yourself a quick reality check, remember, it could always be worse than what it is. I know some people are like, impossible. It can't be worse than what it is. It seems like it's all ending. That's catastrophic thinking, by the way. Okay, so negative attitudes. Well, so we said there's attitudes. We know where they come from, so to speak, in regards to what they can be positive or negative. But then let's get into, when I said where they come from, let's dig a little deeper into that. So what is really the source, if you think about it, of negative attitudes? And I'll even go as far as to say that this also applies to positive attitudes. But this show probably isn't so much about a readjustment of a positive attitude. It's me hoping to say, if you're experiencing this, or if you're seeing this, or if you're hearing this, you might be subjected to having flawed cognition about something in your life, so to speak, that's exuding itself in the way that you behave. So when I say the source of negative attitude, and this, like I said, applies also to positive. But I would flat out tell you this when I counsel people. Part of what we look at, and it depends on what school of thought you come from in regards to psychology, because I'm a counselor that's based in psychology. And the bottom line is, if you're Freudian or Erickson, you might dig a little deeper into childhood, which is a huge platform that we build up from as adults. But there comes a point of time where through the lifespan, you grow, you change, experiences can move you away from maybe some negative things as a kid, and you realize the power lies within you now as an adult to be the architect of your present and your future, regardless to what building materials that your past actually gave you. But I'm gonna tell you something, that's heavy lifting, especially if you had a childhood that was just laden with trauma and difficulty. Getting to the mindset that you are the architect opposed to just the actual occupant of your life is difficult, but it can be done if you so wish it to happen, along with the help of someone like myself, because we are merely tools in regards to counselors and helping people to make that change. But when we talk about the source of negative attitudes, and The same source could be said for positive. It's feelings and belief systems that are predicated on doubt about everything, doubt about yourself. I separated those out because I think it's important. Worry and anxiety. It's emotions that contribute to developing the negative attitude. So if you are, in your mind, if you feel like nothing ever goes right because that's been what your experience has dictated to you, like, I don't know why you're trying to do this because every time you do something, you mess it up. That's the self-talk, which, by the way, will be next week's episode, is about self-talk and how to really begin to harness it and use it to your advantage. But realistically, if you had continued failures, the chances of you being able to have positive self-talk, hence having a positive attitude, is often difficult. It may be a challenge for you daily, though this is daily work, even with a positive attitude. So feelings and belief systems are predicated on doubt, then self-doubt, worry, and anxiety. And this is what contributes to a negative attitude. So let's do something that I think gives it more perspective, so to speak. Let's reverse engineer it. Let's talk about positive and negative attitudes from the sources that they generate from. One of the best ways to deal with an issue or a problem legitimately is to reverse engineer it, which means what the outcome is, you look at it. And I always tell people you can do this in your head, but sometimes when I work with clients, I'll say, let's reverse engineer this on paper, okay? Write down what is the issue / the outcome. What attributes or things contributed to that outcome happening? Now that's where it can be real muddy, because if it's you, then people struggle with that. And you reverse it all the way down so you can get to the basis of where the problem originated. And once you get to the origination point of the problem, then you can say, how much of within this origination point can I be accountable for and be an influencer for? You can't control everything in your life all the time, but if there's something within the initial problem that can change the trajectory of the issue, then that's what you focus on. Reverse engineering is always interesting, and you can do it with absolutely anything that you feel compromises you, whether it's relationships with family and friends, situations at jobs. When something negative arises, reverse engineer it. In fact, make it something you put into your toolbox even when something amazing happens. Reverse engineer everything, I'm telling you, because when something successful happens, say, this was the outcome. It might be what you wanted. It might have been even more than what you expected. Say, this was the outcome. These are the things that happened that led to that outcome. And this ultimately was the source that provided all these opportunities to lead to the outcome. Because now you start to create this mental map of how to be more successful at things opposed to negative. So reverse engineer positive things as well as negative things. So when we reverse engineer, whether it's positive or negative, here's the thing I want you to think about. And you've heard these sayings for. If you happen to be Shakespearean, you probably all read something in high school because you were forced to. I happen to like Shakespeare. I'm kind of nerdy like that. But it all comes down to, I think. Experiences where they're past, and experiences happen every day. So hence, even in the present right now, this is an experience that's unfolding for you. It shapes your current and even future way of thinking. So if you've had a life that has literally been just difficult and always an uphill battle, if you're reverse engineering it, because you might be like, nothing ever works, I don't trust people, the whole list, whatever the issue is, write it down and look into why these things happen. It could have literally have started as a child. When we look at childhood experiences, and there's an episode really in the beginning when I talk about attachment styles, which means the way that you were parented. Presence being, parents being present, parents not being present. Did you have a authoritarian type, parent, which was what I say goes, or authoritative parent who pretty much gave you structure, but they also gave you room to grow? Or did you literally have that parent that was laissez-faire, which was like, go forth into the world and make mistakes and live, because you know what? That's the best way to learn. It's been said by research that the authoritative parent is the best because it gives discipline and structure while also allowing growth. So you always at some point maybe have to peek a little bit back, but I don't like to take people way back unless there's a lot of trauma involved, because sometimes you do have to deal with the trauma, especially if you see it being reoccurring patterns within relationships for you, like trust issues. You got to get to the root of, why don't I trust people? So you have to get to the experience in your past, and past can be your last relationship with someone. It could be the past 2 relationships. It might be, why have my last 3 relationships all ended up the same? You can reverse engineer that legitimately and look at, 1, But when you reverse engineer looking at relationships, you must look at each person individually. And then you're looking for commonality in the experience, not so much about them, but more about you. To get to the core of, perhaps I was too giving. I didn't understand my boundaries. Different things led to this. I reverse engineer every relationship, at least the last 3 I've been in, and I realized the common denominator in the problem was me. And it's with you too. But I got to understand why I was the common denominator, because I was definitely dealing with people that were broken, who wanted to project themselves as if they had healed, but they really hadn't. But the thing is, I was aware that I was seeing that fragmentation of their emotion. But I like to give people a chance. Well, I realized if someone walks in with a full 7-piece Louis Vuitton set of luggage into your relationship, chances are they've had a lot of travels and they brought a lot of stuff with them. Do you want to do that with them? But that's a whole nother conversation. We'll have some more relationship conversation where I'll bring on some relationship experts, and we'll kind of unpack those things and kind of say, how can I make better choices with this? Because I feel like I'm making the same mistake. But if you're like me, until I realized my mistake, I thought it was very genuine, that I was being kind and supportive, only to realize what I was doing was a detriment. So reverse engineering it was the way that I found the commonality that I had throughout all those relationships to realize why they were wrong. It's interesting. So I think experience, past and present, will shape your current thinking about things. So if you don't trust people, there's a reason why. If you're afraid to try something new because you think you're going to fail, there's a reason why. Get to the source of why you're afraid of failure, because failure is absolutely normal and it's necessary for personal and professional growth. Unless you fail, you don't learn how to grow and be better. Guess what? That's that episode about comfort zones and being challenged. Go back and check that one out. It's a good one. Okay, so if I think, which means I'm ruminating on things, I'm taking things in. On the flip side of this, let me give you the positive element. If you've been lucky enough to have positive experiences with success, then you don't lack the same insight in regards to, I'm afraid to try something. Your insight will be, I'm okay with trying something, because the last time I tried this, the unexpected outcome was this, or the expected outcome was this, and it was worth the risk. Risk should always be calculated, and the risk should never, ever get to the point where the harm of which you're trying to pursue is great and long-term. Risk does come with, obviously, some potential for discomfort, but it should never result in pain. Just know that when you're looking at back engineering something, like, here was the risk. When I did this, did I realize that the consequence was going to be extremely damaging and painful? Or did I know I might just be a bit uncomfortable for a moment until I got to the desired outcome that I wanted? It's okay to be uncomfortable, but nothing should ever be dangerous or painful. Just know that when you are calculating risks that you're going to take in anything that you do. So the positive person, I think, lays into their background with experience and says, you know what? I was challenged, but I was good. One of the things I can appreciate now as an adult is that when I was a child, my mother would constantly make me do things I didn't want to do. I mean, she'd make me go audition for things, and I was like, I don't want to do this. But some things I came to like after I experienced it. But part of what I gained from her kind of pushing me forth into the world to experience things, one, it actually learned to be a good speaker, to tell you the truth, because I was doing things where I had to speak to people. Two, it took away my fear of going into the unknown, but it also made me understand risk. So I came to understand that the richness of life isn't where you sit in your comfort. It's often when you're challenged and you grow that way. So because as a child, I was taught to take a certain amount of risk in understanding what I wanted to achieve, as an adult, I'm not as uncomfortable with the idea of stepping out my comfort zone. And I can tell you that ties back to my childhood and having a realistic, I'll even tell you this word, realistic versus positive perspective about risk. The risk in doing something, it wasn't painful, and I learned something and grew. So that's something I carried forward with me. So yes, it was a positive experience, but it was also realistic. So that's another word that I'm not going to say is synonymous with positive, because realistic can also be eye-opening, like, whoa, hold up, wait a minute. But it doesn't have to be painful or dangerous. So for me, my past experience shaped my current thinking about not being afraid to try new things. One thing else that my mother said to me, and I was like, what? I'm an only child. And so I remember my first day of kindergarten, I was excited. I was a preschool dropout because those kids got on my nerves because I walked at 7 months. I was potty trained early. I was on the go. So when I went to preschool, I was very like not interested. And I said, can I just stay home and nap? And apparently my mom thought it was okay for me to stay home and nap. So I was a preschool dropout, but I was so excited to go to kindergarten. And I remember my mother saying to me, okay, I get too tearful. And okay, it's going to be a big day and it's okay. You'll make some friends, but everybody might not like you. And I was like, what? Are you coming back at noon? I was ready to go. I wasn't thinking about the idea because I was a child that someone may not like me. What's interesting about her telling me that as a child, though, it made more sense the more I matured and relationships developed over time with different people. That stuck with me. And saying, just because people don't like you, it doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. Everybody has their reasons for feeling a certain way. That was a life lesson, and it was a realistic one. But it also taught me to be okay with being in situations if people didn't like me. So now people are like, I don't like you. I'm like, well, that's too bad for you because I really don't care. And I was like that in high school, which made me not all that popular because I kind of had a bad attitude in a way people thought because I didn't feel the need to have to be in the pack. And when people wanted to challenge me on stuff, and it happened, and I came to realize over time why people challenged me because I was okay walking to the beat of my own drum. And so that didn't do well in the stage of your life where peer interaction is what people expect of you. So people kind of looked at me like and totally misinterpreted my personality and my attitude because I wasn't afraid to be alone. So it's interesting. So that past helps to build every time you go through your lifespan at different developmental points. So let's talk about if I think, then the other part of that statement, therefore I am. So the way you think elicits the emotional response. So if I have ingrained in my mind that it's okay if people don't like me, especially if I've done nothing wrong, I'm going to be okay with it. Then I don't go through life feeling insecure or having to feel like I need to fit in. I'm not trying to put a circle into a square peg. So therefore, I am comfortable with being me. I don't get upset when someone says, I don't like you, or you think you're special. Those kind of statements don't bother me. But on the flip side, if you need affirmation of others to feel comfortable in the world, that statement to you based on past experience or feeling the need to find a place where you belong, and belonging starts literally in childhood. Anybody who knows anything about Maslow's hierarchy of need is about, a whole list of things. It's tiered. It's 5-tiered. It says there are basic needs that have to be met. You have to have pretty much physiological needs met, which means like shelter, food, water, all those kind of things. And the next one is safety. And that means you feel safe emotionally and mentally and physically. That third is like love and belonging. You feel like, where you are, you're accepted. Those are all key things. Maslow asserted that there's no way you could move to the top of the pyramid and self-actualize or have self-esteem, because self-esteem and then it goes self-actualization, if you miss the basic needs part of the pyramid. And it's true. It's a basic concept. It makes sense. If you've never really felt someone loved you, starting in your childhood, if you never felt that you belonged, what are the chances that you're a good functioning adult if you've never addressed that? You're probably that person who constantly, or you may know someone, is trying to find a place to fit in because you've never had it. And that love and belonging piece is so important because you'll find people, and this is interesting, that can find love and belonging, but not necessarily have safety or their physiological needs met. But because they feel loved and they belong, they will stay in a place that's maybe not the best for them in safety and doesn't even provide for their basic needs. You ever seen a situation, or you've heard of children that come from abusive situations and they can never stop loving their parent because some part of that has been a connection piece. They're trying to connect. They're trying to belong. So if that parent is still present, they're going to work as hard as they can to try to create that space of love and belonging. It's interesting. Childhood is obviously our nexus of where we can really continue to build from. But it doesn't mean that it's unchangeable because the lifespan is not mutable. And that's what people don't understand. So when we talk about therefore I am, it's the way that you think then turns into your emotions, which ultimately turns into the way that you behave. So something that I've put into the let's reverse engineer it is I created something called the manifestation equation. This is totally Maya. Thoughts plus feelings equal actions. It's that simple. That's where attitude comes from. Action is mirrored and called attitude because it is the construct, so to speak, of what drives your actions or how you do it. So let's just say that you've been in situations where you've been taken advantage of, so you're defensive with people. So you walk into a situation and instantly you feel like someone's taking advantage of you. So your feelings are you shut down, you pull away, maybe you become a little apprehensive. And your action is physically you choose to pull away. Some people manifest that in anger because anger is a defense mechanism. They'll be like, hey, don't you dare. Even though there's fear underneath the anger, that's the way they're trying to self-preserve. So I always say when you get in a situation, think about the manifestation equation. Right now, what am I thinking? And as I'm thinking this, I'm starting to feel this way. How am I going to act? This is how we learn to respond versus reacting to things, is using the manifestation equation, something I totally made up. But it's the way I do it. I told you, it's like the movie Sherlock Holmes, which I'm sure you've seen, where with Robert Downey Jr., where he freezes a scenario before it happens, and he plays the entire thing out in his head. And then when he's done thinking it, it unfolds exactly what he thought. Now, in real life, it doesn't work that way. But you can definitely look at the variables that are present and say, this is present, and what's the likelihood of the outcome of the situation, especially if you're dealing with people and you know how they behave. That's where your EI, your emotional intelligence, is so important because you know exactly what to anticipate because of who you're dealing with. That this is not going to go well because they're going to get instantly defensive because there's no accountability. There never has been. We probably see this more in more intimate relationships with people, like with family or significant others. We come to know the players in our life. And the bottom line is that the narrative that unfolds, you'll say, I know exactly how that person's going to respond to this situation because the past has always proven to manifest itself again in the present. Know the people in your life. That's a key thing. So the manifestation equation is, as you're in a situation, when you think about something, I won't tell you to instantly say, why did I think that way? You can. If you're feeling the time allows that, like this thought pops up, this is not going to go well. So then I would tell you, where did that thought come from? What indicates that this isn't going to go well? Whatever this is, are you saying it based on past experience? Are you saying it based on fear? Are you saying it because it's unknown and you just would rather err on the side of being negative? And then when you do that, what feeling does it elicit? I'm going to plan for the worst and hope for the best. That right there is a platform for negative thinking and a negative attitude. That means you're not going to even be optimistic about that this could go totally the opposite. Even though someone would tell you, well, you said you're going to hope for the best, but you're going to be ready for the worst. So you're kind of trying to strike a balance. Well, it depends on if you're heavier on the side of optimism or if you're heavier on the side of negativity. It just depends. I'm not saying don't be realistic because sometimes that can be a truthful assessment of a situation that perhaps the outcome isn't going to be the greatest, but maybe it won't be as bad as it could be. It's very possible. So that's something that I put on the table is a manifestation equation is the minute a thought pops in your head about a situation, ask yourself, why do I think this is what's going to happen? And what feeling is illicit from me? And here is how I'm going to act accordingly because I'm going to respond opposed to react because let's be honest, I don't know the outcome. So I'm going to lead with a positive attitude that this can be the outcome. And if it's different, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it because that's something I'll tell you that positive attitudes, that's something you have in your toolbox. I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. It doesn't mean you're not willing to address a situation, but if you've done everything within your power to deal with a situation, you can't actually then respond to something until you know what the outcome is. And then you can choose to do something different. Complicated. It really requires a lot of emotional intelligence to really be able to deal with something like that. So, real talk. I want you to think about this. If we systems, which is encompassed by people, places, and things, have you thrived, survived, or suffered in relation to these domains? So your relationships with people, have you thrived? Do you have good working relationships with people within your family, significant others, your friendships, things of that? Have you just always felt like you were in survival mode? You were always trying to just like tread the emotional water. You know, are you that person in the family who always has to hold things together? So you feel like you're treading emotional water. So you don't really feel like your relationships have truly thrived because of maybe some relationship dynamics within your family or the exact relationship dynamics with your significant other. Or maybe you've repeated some poor patterns of behavior with your children. So you're trying to survive through those relationships. Or have you felt like you legitimately have suffered and can't say that you feel like you have any real positive relationships in your life? Now, in saying that, I'm gonna layer this a bit more and say, how do you feel about this in your current life? Because one of the things that I want people to really think about as we navigate this conversation is, are you thriving, just surviving, or are you in peril or suffering as you reflect on this? Because we're in the pandemic. Part of what I want people to start to really use as part of their point of reference when you listen to the show, because the pandemic is an extraneous variable that's affecting outcomes for people that they can't control. When you start really assessing your life, I want you often to think past the pandemic, especially if you're in the survive or suffer mode. Was it like that before the pandemic? Because now we're talking about some long-standing issues that might need to be addressed. But if some of your strife and issues comes from the pandemic, then we realize, okay, this is more situationally related, and we can probably get to the core of the issue that's causing the problems in your life, hence the poor thinking about things, generating the feelings that are not healthy, and having you react in a way that's not appropriate. Hence, here comes the bad attitude, the negative attitude. So I want you to look at your current life in real talk and say, a lot of my struggles right now are related to the pandemic. It's affected, and it has affected relationships. People didn't know spending so much time with people would be the worst thing ever, because some people were praying for more time. And they're like, oh, please, I've had so much time with my children or my significant other. We don't have to have no more time together for like another year or two. Because you know what? It was far more emotional and mentally taxing than they expected, but it was that way because it was under unexpected and uncontrollable circumstances that made these situations different. Keep that in mind. It was stressful for everybody involved to have to be around people 24/7. You lost your connections to the outside world unless you could still go to work. And some people relish that moment, even if it was stressful. So those are things you have to keep in perspective. But if we reverse engineer this and our origin point with the issue goes past the pandemic, now we're working on something different that we have to look into. That's key. Because obviously we know that COVID is something that complicated or exacerbated issues for people. So that's the thing I want you to know. Let's have our official first toolbox time, because I always tell you to take out your EI for the first one, but this is our official one. Objectivity is paramount in being able to do self-evaluation. And if we're trying to put this in perspective about positive and negative attitudes, there's no room for subjectivity in this conversation. You must be 100% objective to do this type of self-evaluation, because if you're not being 100% honest with yourself, there's never a reason to lie to you. When you start lying to you, that means the problem is much deeper than you realize. I get why we lie to other people, but when you lie to yourself, that means you're legitimately using those ego defense mechanisms we talked about last week. Here's where you should be able to stand your ground, look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, real talk. I was struggling before the pandemic emotionally and mentally, and maybe even financially. It just got worse during the pandemic because my situation was affected by this, and this. So when I separated out these two situations, the question is, what can I have control of now to fix moving forward? And how can I make adjustments to the things that maybe I can't control to make it a little bit more easier to deal with? You need to have the objectivity to be able to do that type of self-evaluation. Because if you're only going to be subjective in this and only see it as woe is me, you're not going to get very far. You have to be in the here and now with attitude. It means acting in the moment for what's happening and kind of tucking away what I call redundant reaction attitude, which is redundant is something you don't need, but you keep using anyways, and it's reactionary. So if you want to get away from having redundant reaction attitude, stay in the here and now in the situation. Like something happens and you say, this is what just happened. I'm feeling this way. Why am I feeling this way? Oh, because it reminds me of something that happened in the past. This gets into implicit and explicit bias, which is so interesting, because I'm not saying operate in the world without knowing about things can happen and outcomes. I'm not saying be unrealistic. But at the same time, if your thought is being generated by a past experience that's rooted in, let's say, trauma or something that was really out of your control, these are the things we're focusing on fixing. Because now you are the architect and not the occupant of your life. And that's the part that's so important. You're not just living here and using things in the house of you. You can make repairs and changes and even choose to upgrade the house of you if you so choose to. That takes work and courage, though, but it's absolutely doable. It's absolutely doable. So, how do you know? Because some people go through life and not know that they really have a bad attitude. They kind of take it as, this is my personality. This is how I am. They're just kind of abrasive. That's who they feel they are. And they feel like, this is me. And if you can't accept it, then too bad. Well, here's the thing. Sometimes that's okay. And sometimes it's not. And if it's starting to impact your ability to be productive, and if you're missing opportunities because this is you, doesn't align with maybe what's needed to access an opportunity, this is what you got to think about. We constantly talk about things like that self-talk. Self-defeating talk is so important. That's why I can't wait to the conversation of self-talk next week and how to construct it and what it looks like, and how it should sound to you. Because, it's really all within you. Self-talk is one of those constructs that's it's not something you can actually kind of frame out, because it's a conversation you're having with you. But if the conversation you're always having is, you can't do this, you're not good enough for this, then chances are you're not going to reflect anything positive, because you already think negative about yourself. Negative assumptions. If you always assume the worst of everything, regardless to what the situation is, even if it possibly could be the opposite, you rather think negatively of it, chances are that's reflective in your personality. The other side of that is negative comparisons with others. If you're always looking at the good in others and you can't see the good in you, you're never going to give yourself that room to grow, to be that best version of you, because you're too busy trying to keep up with the Joneses, or you feel that the Joneses are the example of what is excellent. Nothing is perfect in this world. But if you are using examples of things that do not reflect who you are, because that's who you want to be, we already talked about, you must be present in who you are, and fake it till you make it. It's never going to work. You have to be willing to be present for who you are in this moment and make the adjustments accordingly to get to being where you want to be, and the person that you seek this is me. This is what I want to achieve. And here are the things that are stopping me. Here's the thing that's blocking my happiness. Here's what's blocking my blessings. It's really, really important. Do you focus on negative ruminations about the past? You ever find that person who can't let the past go? Even like you've been in a relationship and you sit down and you talk about the situation. Let's everybody apologizes and you say you're moving forward. And the minute something wrong happens again, you or the other person goes back to a past experience. If you can't reconcile things as they happen, it doesn't mean you did it immediately. Sometimes it takes time to reconcile things depending on the pain or the damage that it caused. But once you actually have the time to sit down, look at the situation, evaluate how you feel, get what you need from that evaluation, because here's the thing, you may never get the words "I'm sorry" from somebody. So you have to find it within yourself to find peace with the situation. People struggle with that because some people literally need to hear someone say "I'm sorry." They need for someone to bend over and kiss their ass. Nothing else is good enough for them. That's deep-seated, absolutely negativity, that you can't move past something because of the need to feel so validated. So you keep ruminating on the past, it's kind of hard to be present and even work towards having the positive future you want. Are you disempowered by beliefs from difficult people? Sometimes you have people who have very strong personalities and they try to assert their views on you, and you don't feel that you have enough power. By the way, go back to the episode about self-advocacy. Huge, about finding that way to find your internal voice to advocate for yourself. Because when you let other people to create your narrative and to continue to write your story, you're never going to be able to be happy. So if you think someone else controls your happiness, your attitude will reflect that. Do you always desire to put the blame on others? That lack of accountability, a negative attitude. It's always, I hate to say this, you got some people who play the victim role all the time. It's always somebody else's fault. I didn't do this. The level of accountability is so poor. If you're not willing to take ownership of the things that you've done wrong or things you could have done differently in the relationship that could have affected the outcome, chances of you being really happy are going to be difficult. The other parts of this is, can you forgive yourself when you make a poor decision? We're all human. We don't have the answers. But I will tell you this. Sometimes we are in situations where people make you feel like, you did that? You? And then you start feeling guilty, like, well, yeah. Then you feel like you can't make a mistake because people have put you on this pedestal. And here's a problem. You went along with it because guess what? You liked it when you were up there. But how the mighty fall. And when you fall, you're like, wow, okay, this is difficult to navigate. Because people, if they if they hold you to a higher standard, that doesn't go away when you make mistakes. In fact, I would tell you the standard's even higher when you make a mistake. So be mindful that you can forgive yourself and be okay with the fact that we all make mistakes. And if you're struggling with the idea of failure or making mistakes, that's one of the first things you have to work on. We all are human. We're going to make poor choices. We're not always going to do the right thing. And it doesn't mean that was always your intention. But I'll tell you this, if you learn how to respond versus reacting, you'll do better in situations. You'll make far fewer mistakes because you're looking and evaluating the situation that's in front of you. Now, it doesn't mean the outcome of that situation may always be successful. Remember, failure is natural in life. It's going to happen, but it's what you do with that failure that makes a difference. It becomes a learning moment for you. Take something from it. Don't just let it be failure and you let it sit inside of you and create sadness and anxiety. No, use it to be a means to empower yourself. Those are key things about bad attitudes. Those are like pretty much 7 or 8 things that you often can see happening repeatedly. That redundant reaction attitude is what I call that. I key that myself. There's no term that says that, but it's redundant, something you don't need, and it's often reaction based, and it's poor, and it projects in your attitude. Podcast thread. Episode 39, which if you haven't listened to, I would encourage you to, talks about defense mechanisms, ego mechanisms, Freudian, that talks about things that we do unconsciously to avoid stress, conflict, and discomfort. I'm going to tell you something. Go back and listen to that episode. It has everything to do about denial, projection. There's so many things. And I said at some point of our life, we have probably all been guilty of using a defense mechanism because it's often unconscious. But the whole point of it was to bring these things to the pre-conscious and the conscious to know I'm employing a technique that's not healthy. And hence, it often will be reflected in your attitude because within most defense mechanisms, there's a part of you that is being defensive. So go back and check out episode 39 because it weaves right into the thread of this episode 40, so to speak. You're tuned into My Ambition, Your Ambition. We're going to take a quick break. There's some things I want to share with you. And when I come back, we're going to talk about, okay, let's get to the positive side. We talked about how this can be a detriment, what's positive and negative about it, but what can we do? We can do about it to be that person that's positive. I think that part is really key. So we're going to take a break, and I'll be right back, and we'll jump into that side of the show, everybody.
Please stop and listen because this important message may directly apply to you or someone dear to you. Several thousand African-American former full-time CPS teachers were unfairly terminated starting in the mid-90s and continuing to the 2000s. If you are one of those many former CPS teachers who was unjustly terminated, or if you are the immediate relative of a now deceased unjustly terminated former CPS teacher, you may qualify to participate in a lawsuit at no upfront cost to you. Please call 773-580-7183 immediately for more information. That's 773-580-7183. Do not delay. Act today, because time is of the essence. That's 773-580-7183. 773-580-7183.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans, and soon they will be available to everyone.
This vaccine means hope. It will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
I want to go back to work and I want to be able to move around.
To visit with Michelle's mom, to hug her and see her on her birthday.
You know what I'm really looking forward to is going to opening day in Texas Ranger Stadium with a full stadium.
We've lost enough people and we've suffered enough damage.
In order to get rid of this pandemic, it's important for our fellow citizens to get vaccinated.
I'm getting vaccinated because we want this pandemic to end as soon as possible.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
So roll up your sleeve and do your part.
This is our shot.
Now it's up to you.
I can't breathe. I have migraines, numbness, weight loss. I live with it every day. The illness that I'm suffering from is an anxiety disorder, and it deserves to be treated like any other illness. But it's not.
Welcome back to Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. I share that about anxiety disorders because it is National Mental Health Awareness Month for the month of May. So throughout the episodes of the month of May, I'm going to share some different things that I think that people should be aware of, because mental illness is a stigma. Mental wellness should be part of a way of life for you. It's rethinking the idea of what they are. And this is a month where we can bring a lot of important things to the forefront and hopefully give people the courage to step out if they're struggling with depression or anxiety. Because the thing is, there is help and there are resources, but you can only be tied to those things if you're willing to come forth and seek the help. So of course, if you need a resource, feel free to reach out to me. You can go to M.A.Y.A and you can send me a message there, and I'll be more than happy to send you some information as much as I can in regards to your situation. So it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and I want everyone to be aware of it, to be open-minded, and let's change our idea of thinking about mental wellness as well as mental illness, because they're actually two different things. So this is episode 40. Attitude is everything. Let's jump right into a real talk time too. A positive attitude does not mean every day or every moment is sunshine and rainbows. That's the thing about the show I want to be honest about. Even the idea of happiness, I don't want to embellish it and make you feel like everything is going to be super duper exciting. And it means you should always be upbeat and just like, singing in the rain, twirling a rain, an umbrella. No. See, that's the unrealistic kind of expectations about happiness. Sometimes happiness is just being content in where you are. You might be thriving, things might be good. It doesn't mean that every moment is full of something exciting and just riveting. No, that's real talk. That's not what happiness is about. And having a positive attitude doesn't mean you have to be the person who walks in the room like, hi, everybody, what's going on? Jazz hands. No, that's not what any of that means. So I want you to know you can have a positive attitude, and it doesn't mean that you're doing anything extra or it has to be visibly present to people. It could just be you smile. You just pleasant. When someone says something negative, you choose to counteract it with something, positive, or you just kind of say, that's kind of a negative way of thinking, and you let it go. That's all positive attitude is. It doesn't mean you're confrontational all the time. It doesn't mean you have to have the answer for everything. It doesn't mean you're everybody's savior either. Just know that. So I want to make sure that that's put in perspective. So let's have our second toolbox time rather. And I was looking forward to this because I've not had one time where I could share this. Our second toolbox time. For everybody who knows Maya's love affair with cats, I'm sorry. Just know that you don't have to be exuding, like I said, happiness all the time. You can be Mew, as my picture shows you. He's got the cutest little kitty with this look on his face like not feeling it. You can have days where you're not feeling it, and it's okay. But you have to know when you're having the not feeling it day so that you can adjust your attitude accordingly. So if you know you're having a not feeling it day, you might limit your interactions with people because maybe you need some more you time or private space. You may not engage in too many conversations because you may feel like the outcome is not going to be good because my attitude may shift and be bad. And when you're trying to control your attitude, you want to avoid things that are going to exacerbate the fact that you're not feeling it today, which means any negative energy, negative people, negative situations, you want to steer clear of those things. And you're allowed to be Mew. You can. You don't have to be overly happy. But the key thing, the toolbox is acknowledging when you have it, acknowledging when you wake up on the wrong side of the bed. And don't carry that forth into your day, or don't put it on other people is a key thing. So it might be a day where you just kind of stay to yourself and leave it at that. We don't have to have a fantastic and amazing day all the time. Remember, you have to look, listen, and evaluate and execute. Take your emotional and mental temperature on a daily basis. Know when you are not feeling people, places, and things. I'll be honest. How many times have you seen a person and they're at work and they're like, I was fine before I got here. This whole place just ruins my attitude. Real talk. I know people like that. I'm not going to lie. I've had days where I felt like that, where I just wasn't feeling it. Situations unfold at work and it gets to be really overwhelming. And all of a sudden you can have an attitude shift. I've done it. I'm human and I know better, but it doesn't mean because I know better, I always do better. I do most of the time, but I have those days where I'm just not feeling it. So a key thing is take your emotional and mental temperature when it comes to interacting with people, places, and things. So if you know you have to go to a place that's going to not bring the best in you, for instance, if you know you have a court date, chances are, especially if it's a situation that's difficult for you, just know that you're not going to walk in the door having this really great attitude about it, because you may not want to be there. But just be even keel and neutral in your attitude, because think about why you're there and what the possible outcomes could be and decide accordingly. So don't go in with a chip on your shoulder, even if technically you feel like this is so unfair. One, life is not fair. We learned that in kindergarten. So if you know a situation is going to elicit a negative attitude from you, you know it, don't give in to it. If you know you're dealing with a person that seems like they bring out the worst in you, one, if it's possible to avoid that person, do so, or have limited access to them. Or here's one more important. If you know they flip a switch for you, don't let them do it, because now you've identified, I just realized this person's a trigger for me. Once you know that, that means you have the ability to respond opposed to react to them. And then lastly, I talked about places, situations. Just know you have the ability to be in control 100%. And now people are like, no, yes, you do. We can choose when we're going to have a bad attitude. And I've gone as far as to say, I'm going to have a bad attitude with this. I just own it. I own it. I know that something bad is about to happen or come out my mouth. Like, yeah, I'm going to have to correct this, and there's no way I'm going to try to be civil about it. But it may not always be that way. But I always know, but whatever consequence comes from my action, I'm going to have to sit in it and accept it. So if you decide you're going to have a bad attitude because you believe that's what that situation or that person warrants from you, whatever the consequence it is, make sure you're ready to sit in it and be in it, because you're actually facilitating it going the wrong direction opposed to choosing a different choice. So I'm big on accountability, because we're not always going to be like Mary Poppins, like 24/7. But when the minute you decide to not pop open your umbrella and fly away like Mary Poppins, you better know whatever happens when the rain falls, at least you have an umbrella. And the umbrella is, I knew the situation. Okay, so that's our second toolbox and last toolbox time of the show. But I think it's important to say to people, you don't have to be absolutely happy all the time when we talk about having this positive attitude. You might just be even keel, and there's nothing wrong with that. So how can you work to have and maintain positive or a healthy attitude, so to speak? A couple things you can work on. One, self-coaching through affirmations daily. I love Brandy Harris, who follows me. She's a former coworker up here, who every day she has a calendar of positive affirmations and she posts them on Facebook. I love it. I think that's great, because if you can't come up with the affirmations yourself, you can do one or two things. You can go get the calendar like she did, and or there's sites that you can subscribe to for daily affirmations, something that helps you to mentally focus, to emotionally focus. Two, self-motivation through discovering your motives, purpose. When you act without purpose, chances are you're not going to like the outcomes. When you do something because you know what it is that you seek and you're going to figure out how to get there, you do things with greater intentions, and that means you're more committed, and you're probably going to proceed with a better attitude about it, which is key. Three, attitude talk for positive internal dialogue. That's kind of like taking the daily affirmation and really turning into that self-talk. So you found, I am somebody. Let's just go with that. We all have heard that. Jesse Jackson, I am somebody. Say you read that on your daily affirmation, and throughout the day, that's a self-talk. Say you're sitting in a situation and a negative thought pops up. Take your daily affirmation, which is, I am somebody. I am somebody. And push the negative thought out your head, what's trying to elicit the bad attitude from you. Another thing you can do, obviously, is the power of words. Wow is a big deal. Watch your words. I can't tell you. There's nothing worse. People like, I'm keeping it 100. Okay, but does that mean that you need to say something that you want to retract because you felt the need to express something that maybe you should have put a filter on? Choosing to filter out inappropriate things to say doesn't mean you're not keeping it 100 or you can't be honest. It's learning the art of how to use your words properly to express how you feel without necessarily being offensive to someone or discrediting yourself, or creating some type of pain or anxiety for somebody else and or for yourself. Words are weapons. So the watch your words is a big deal. Be mindful of what you say to people, how you articulate, because remember, now that becomes part of your attitude. So if you're coming to someone with negativity, negative words, then guess what? You're going to be perceived as having a negative attitude, and you're going to feel it. My thing is that if you have to say something uncomfortable, one of the first things I say to people is, I need to say something you may not agree with on me, but this is how I'm feeling, so I'm going to express it. Hopefully you'll understand. And then I proceed to say what I need to say. Because acting under a cooler head, opposed to letting emotion drive your conversation, will always keep you in a better place. So if you're a person who's a hothead, don't try to engage in conversation, because chances are it's all going to come out wrong, and you're not going to probably properly, one, express yourself, but two, you're going to have to go back and do cleanup work. So work from a place of being mindful of your words and your actions before you allow them to create and become existent into this world. So my final thoughts are just that. Be mindful. Be mindful of your people, places, and things. If certain people elicit a bad response from you, find ways to limit it. Same thing with places and things. Keep your energy safe. I can't tell you how much it is important to keep your energy safe. If somebody is toxic, don't choose to put that in your life. Now, sometimes we have toxic people in our life, and maybe you feel like you have to do it because maybe it's a family member or a child or something, but find ways to limit that toxicity. But more importantly, understand who you're dealing with. Begin to understand where your emotional and mental safe space is when you're dealing with people that are toxic that you have to deal with. Know your boundaries and draw the line, and make it clear what your boundaries are. So I have a friend who loves to just ruminate in past situations, and I got to the point where it used to annoy me. So I created a boundary and said, the last time we did this, I said, something, it's not that I want to be here for you or listen, but this isn't new. It's the same behavior that you keep eliciting and you allow it to upset you. So I'm assuming you're accepting of that. So I'm not going to have this conversation with you again because we've already had it like 10 times. So either you're going to step up to the plate and change the thing that's bothering you, or you're going to let them to continue to emotionally and mentally abuse you. Guess what? She doesn't come to me anymore because I set a boundary, because I found it aggravating and unnecessary. I'm like, it's not that I want to be a friend, but clearly you're allowing someone to abuse you and you know it. So what are you going to do about it? Boundaries are key. By the way, back in one of those episodes, it's a great episode about boundaries. So this is episode 40 of M.A.Y.A. My Ambition, Your Ambition. Thank you for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Remember, you can find episodes of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, at M.A.Y.A.com. Remember, there's always a podcast companion, so additional information, supplemental stuff that you can read, articles that I think are worth reading. You can go to M.A.Y.A.com, click on the podcast resource tab, and voila, just scroll down to episode 40, which is right there at the top, and there's like 2 articles I put in there that I think can help to expand this conversation for you. Hopefully by now you have subscribed to my YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, M.A.Y.A, and click subscribe. I hope as well you're following me on Twitter and Instagram, Maya_Akai, and Facebook, Maya Akai Presents, is also ways that you can follow me on social media. If you happen to have a podcast platform of choice, I will not hold it against you. I appreciate all support in all ways, shapes, or forms. So you can always find me on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, Spotify. You can find me on all those places to listen to your podcast. Just do me a favor. 1, subscribe, and 2, share. And 2, if you ever have a question, something I talk about in the podcast, don't be afraid to send me a direct message on Facebook. You can feel free to put a comment, or you can go to MAYAkai.com. You can send emails as well, and send me an email, and I'll get back to you if there's some kind of resource that you're struggling with or you can't find something. I'm usually a really good resource person. Even if you're not in the state of Illinois, I tend to be very ingenuitive, and I can probably find something that can help you, or at least point you in the right direction. Now, mind you, if you're in another country, I probably can't do that. But if you're US based, I can probably point you in the right direction to find what you're looking for. Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Remember, I always say, how I end my show all the time, is that your present becomes your past and your future is no more. So it is so important that you live every single day to the fullest. I can't begin to tell you how important that really is. Break the stigma of mental health, because May is Mental Health Month. And I want you to start thinking outside the box of your mental wellness, which is your cognitive, your emotional, your physical, your spiritual, all those things. It doesn't mean there's something wrong. It just means occasionally you might get off track. And it's okay, because it happens to everybody. So thank you for tuning in to M.A.Y.A, and live every single day to the fullest, like I said, because every day is an opportunity to do something new, to change your trajectory, and to become that architect of the house of you, opposed to just living there and sitting on the furniture somebody else put in there, using the light fixture somebody else gave you, having limited access maybe to what's on TV. Why should you have limited access to being the best version of you because you're not being the person who is constructing it? So remember, we're architects here. We are not just occupants of our life. All right, everybody, until next time, be safe, be well, and stay blessed. I'll see you next Thursday.
You feeling stuck lately? Like life's passing you by? Get to know M.A.Y.A.
Acronym, My Ambition, Your Ambition.
Reconnect with your dreams, your goals, your ambitions. Find your motivation and start to live the life you desire. Explore the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast at M.A.Y.A.com. Whether you're on the go or listening on your cell phone, tablet, or laptop, you can find the show in the iTunes, Google, and iHeartRadio platforms.
With all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and get ready to be inspired and motivated to harness your ambition.